So we'll be in the book of Daniel, chapter 6. Last week we were in the book of Daniel, chapter 1, I think. And so tonight just move a few chapters over and we will be in Daniel, chapter 6. Same spot as last week. You're going to be in the Old Testament, near the end of the Old Testament, right before you get to all the minor prophets that are there. It's going to be after Ezekiel. After Isaiah, after Jeremiah, after Lamentations, after Ezekiel, then comes Daniel. Old Testament book. Does everybody manage to... I still see a few people flipping. So tonight we're going to look at a famous biblical story. It's a story that if you were growing up as a kid in the church, it's likely that you probably heard this story at some point. It's a favorite biblical story to tell. It's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. So it's a popular one. It's like David and Goliath. It's like the story of Noah. You know, it's a popular story. And it's a story that gets told a lot. But there is a lot of biblical wisdom in this story that is applicable to our lives beyond have faith in God, He will deliver you. That is certainly a key message in the story, is that even in dire, bleak, what appear to be impossible circumstances, that we maintain faith in the Lord and that we trust that He will deliver us. But there is more going on in the story that's worth looking at. There's more that's going on that's worth examining regarding not just Daniel's behavior, but those that would seek to bring him to his demise, and what the king does and how the king reacts. There's a lot going on in this story. We've got a bunch of different characters, and it's worth looking at how all of them behave. Because we're going to have Daniel, then we're going to have King Darius, and then we're going to have the satraps, the magicians, the court of the king that are the ones that conspire to bring Daniel down. And Daniel has a successful run as a leader inside of his captivity. Daniel gets carried into captivity. We talked about that last week. He is carried off into Babylon under, the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. But he is going to wind up going all the way through to the reign of Cyrus. And in between, there are going to be a few rulers that he is going to wind up being a top leader for, which is exceptionally unusual, because typically when a new king comes to power, whoever was in power beforehand normally gets purged, or retired, or executed, or sent their own way, or fired, depending on the circumstances. It is rare to see holdover staff. And even today, when you look at a presidential administration, even if it's the same party, when you look at Reagan left office and Bush 1 came to power, same political party, you saw still a tremendous turnover in staff, a tremendous turnover, even though these were all people that were in the same party. You see the same thing when Democrats come to power. It's still, new president shows up, he wants his team, his guys, he's going to make his mark. You don't typically see a lot of holdovers. But yet Daniel is so wise, so well respected, so highly thought of, so given with supernatural wisdom and understanding from the Lord, that he winds up serving in the ruling administration of multiple rulers, one after the other. And even in the one before Darius, when he's mostly forgotten, there winds up being, a sign on the wall, and nobody knows what it means, and it's you've been weighed in the balance and found wanting, and they dig up Daniel and they go, hey, you know what? We don't know what that means, but there's a guy. There's a guy that used to be around, and he's the one that winds up. So even when he gets pushed off to the side, the Lord doesn't allow it to happen for long before they got to find him and go, hey, we need some information here. So Daniel's wisdom really is supernatural. He really is blessed with understanding that can only come from the Lord. And it's because there is no sin found in him. He is found righteous, not just before the Lord, but before the Medes, the Persians, the Babylonians. He continually does his best to submit and obey to the authority that he is under, regardless of the circumstances, and even when it is not just. And that is something that is difficult to do. Because oftentimes we look at injustice, we look at perverse leadership, we look at people that are in positions of authority that are doing wrong, and our natural instinct is to rebel, to buck against it, to want to act in defiance. But yet the Lord over and over demonstrates in his word that we should be under submission to those in authority. And that by our good deeds, by our righteousness, by our love, that we should win them over. Love is the most powerful weapon of all, but it is oftentimes the most difficult to use because it requires us to exercise patience and to exercise kindness when every fiber of our being, every ounce of ourself says that we need to stand up and fight. And so it is hard to do. But yet that is the model that Jesus gives us. That is the model that the Bible instructs us in. That is the model that ultimately will win. You may not experience it, but ultimately love is the weapon that always wins in the end. Caesars and emperors fed Christians to the lions for centuries. But in the end, it was a Caesar that converted the entire empire to Christianity. Love will always win. It's only a matter of time. And in the end, the ultimate perfect love of Christ will win. There will be a millennial reign. The enemy will be defeated, and love will win. It's just hard when you're stuck waiting for love to win, and you feel like you want to affect change your own way, through your own power. And so sometimes you make decisions that aren't godly, that aren't holy, because you're tired of staring at what you perceive to be wrong. And so we begin tonight. It seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, that they should be in charge of the whole kingdom. And over them 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel was one. So they divide the kingdom up into 120 districts, if it were. And you appoint a guy over each particular area. Kind of think about governors. We got 50 states, each one of them's got a governor. And then under governors, you're going to have mayors. So, we got 120 of these guys. We divided the kingdom up into districts. I'm going to have a top guy in each district. He's going to be in charge. And then we're going to, and on top of them, you got 120 of these guys, right? So then, over each 40 of them, essentially, you're going to have one guy that's going to be kind of over them. And so he's got 3 commissioners, of which Daniel was one. So he's got multiple levels of bureaucracy. Because it's the only way to run anything big, is to have layers of administration and management. And so Daniel was one. That these satraps might be accountable to them, and that the king might not suffer loss. So the king's worried about these governors, these satraps, kind of stealing from the till and not doing the right thing. So he goes, I got to have somebody above them, otherwise I'm going to get robbed blind. Because, if you're the guy that's in charge of some distant province, and, the king's kind of far away, and you're the guy in your area, and all of the revenue, the taxes, the justice, the administration, you're kind of in charge. You're out of sight, out of mind. Who's to say how much the taxes really were? Who's to say how much really got collected? It's always a problem in any organization that people are going to want to skim along the way. It was a problem for the mob when they used to run casinos. How do you stop the guys doing the skim from skimming the skim? It's a tough thing to do. And it's hard. When you hire a thief, it's hard to get him to not steal from you. I remember when I used to work in automotive. One of the dealers I used to work for, he looked at me. We had a used car manager that had been stealing. And he goes, look, all used car managers are thieves to a certain degree. There's always going to be a certain amount of pilfering. What you really are after here is controlling the pilfering and making sure it doesn't get out of line. He expected that there was going to be every time he sold a car to a wholesaler or bought it, he just assumed that surely $100 was making it into his pocket along the way. It's just part of the deal. The parts department can be that way. You have to watch over it because otherwise it's easy for, those parts were stale. We marked them down. We sold them. There was a loss on paper, but we'd already depreciated them. And so it's easy to do. There's 100 ways to steal in any business if you know what you're doing and you're so inclined. And so you have to have people that are on top of it and that are honest. And so the king's got these three guys over these satraps to figure out, okay, look, there's going to be a certain amount of pilfering. We got to watch the skim and make sure that it doesn't get out of line. That's the situation. If you read between the lines. They're all crooks. It's just a matter of controlling the thievery. And so, then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. All right, so now all of the satraps and the other commissioners, they get together and they go, we got a problem. Because Daniel is more capable, he's more gifted, he's smarter, and worst of all, he's honest. All these other guys aren't. So not only is this guy smarter, but he's not putting his talent to good use and teaching them how to steal better and how to steal wiser. They're going, wait a minute, we have got a guy that's about to be put over all of us that knows what we're up to, can see what we're doing, and is about to really impact our ability to enrich ourselves. And what's the point of being a governor or being a ruler in an ancient kingdom if you can't get rich and steal for yourself? It's the whole point of why would you fight that hard to get that kind of job unless you're going to be rich? It's about money and power. That's what these guys want. It's the same reason that you would fight to be a famous Roman general and become a senator and you move up. You're after money. You're after power. Most people that get into politics are not in it. Well, some are, but there's a lot of people that get into politics that are not necessarily in it for the service of their community. I mean, now, they might have the attitude of, I want to serve my community, but I want to win along the way. And sometimes that can work. I grew up in Chicago. It's a notoriously corrupt city. But the politicians there understood that, there could be a little skimming, but the garbage has got to get picked up. As long as the garbage gets picked up, then people will probably look the other way over who gets the garbage contract. The problem is if the trash doesn't get collected, the light starts shining. So Daniel is doing a better job than everybody else. They have a problem with that. So the commissioners and the satraps, they begin trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs. So they start looking. They know the king likes this guy. Every meeting they go to, all of a sudden, Darius is talking about, oh, Daniel, what a great job you're doing. Oh, Daniel found this extra money for me. Hey, look how well Daniel's area is running. What are you doing? You need to get it together. Look at what he's got going on over here. What are you doing over here? He's the superstar that they're all being compared against. And they don't like it. So they start conducting an investigation going, we got to find something on this guy. They start looking, but they could find no ground of accusation or evidence of corruption inasmuch as he was faithful and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Daniel is honest. Daniel is not corrupt. Daniel is not perverse. You know, it's always much easier to tell the truth because you never have to go back and remember the lies that you told and keep them straight. If I always tell the truth, I don't have to remember what the story was that I came up with because I told the truth, and the truth is easy to remember. In Psalms it says, "Blessed are those who do not sit in the counsel of the wicked," right? But their path is the path of righteousness. If you don't give people cause to cause accusation against you, if you aren't caught doing things that are wrong, then people will not have a grievance with you. If you're not committing crimes, if you're not in the wrong place, if you're not hanging out with the wrong people, if you're not engaged in the wrong activities, it becomes very hard for people to find ground to accuse you. It becomes very hard for people to find ways to take you down. The closer that you walk with the Lord, the more that you engage in righteous action, the more that you are willing to adhere to the law of the Lord and walk faithfully with Him, you will not give people cause to accuse you. It's the fastest, easiest, simplest way to stay out of trouble is to take the narrow path. Wide is the way of destruction, narrow is the way of life. But that requires mental discipline. Because the devil is busy with his temptation. The devil is always plotting. The devil has got these guys looking. They're searching. The devil is looking for a way to take Daniel down. And he's got these guys working overtime. But they're not finding anything. So they come together and they go, "We shall not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." So here they go. They go, "Look, this is a good guy. This is a guy that's not doing anything wrong. The only way we're going to take him down is if we attack his God. He worships a foreign god." Remember, these are all pagans. They're worshiping different idols and false gods. They're not abiding by the faith of the one true living God. They believe in different gods. And they look at him and go, "You know what? The only thing we're going to be able to get on him is if we go after his faith. It's the only way we can take him down." And so they go. Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows: "King Darius, live forever." Always know that somebody's up to no good when the first thing out of their mouth is just a bunch of empty flattery. You know, King's been riding these guys. They haven't been performing as well, right? They haven't been doing as good a job. He's about to put Daniel in charge, and the first thing is all this empty flattery. It's the same way when I was in management positions. You know, if an underperforming guy comes up to you and the first thing out of his mouth is a bunch of flattery, you already know. He's going to want some more time off. He's going to want something he didn't earn. He's about to bring a grievance. He's trying to butter you up for whatever's going to come next, because whatever's coming next is bitter. And so he's about to lay it on you, and you already know. You're like, "All right, just let me have it. Just tell me, what do you want? Let's just get it over with." You know. All the commissioners of the kingdom and the prefects and the satraps, the high officials and the governors have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. So they go to the king and they go, "Look, king, you're worthy of worship. You're like a god king anyway. I mean, 2 kings ago, he was building a statue. You know, Nebuchadnezzar built a whole statue, you know, and was making people bow and worship. You should have the same. You know, why shouldn't they pray to you? Let's have it be the month of King Darius. Pray to Darius month. Let's have pray to Darius month." You know, they're going in there and, you know, they're selling it. We'll make it a holiday. Come on, we'll have a pageant. We'll throw a parade. You know, we'll have it be pray to Darius month. So they go in there with whatever sales pitch, whatever idea they have. And, you know, they come up to him with it. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document, that is the injunction. So in the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, there was a law that once an order went out and the king decreed it and he put his signet ring on it and the copies were run, that it couldn't be revoked. And it makes sense because otherwise you might get people that go, well, let's hold off on implementing this law if they didn't like it, thinking maybe it'll change right behind it. Or, it'd be easy to counterfeit. It'd be hard to run the ship that way. And you'd think that as king, you're not going to pass a law or make a proclamation without thinking it through. So Darius does the deal. He goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. So now Daniel knew that the document was signed, and he entered his house. Now in his roof chamber, he had windows opening toward Jerusalem. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. So Daniel knows that the law has been passed. And the first thing he does is he goes up and he prays to the Lord. It's a law that's in direct conflict with the law of God. And so he says, I'm not going to do that. It's one thing to submit to authority. It's another thing to submit to authority when it is commanding you to do wickedness. At that point, you have to stand and go, no, I can't do that. And that's a tough thing. What would we do if loving Jesus, if worshiping the Lord was a crime in America? How many of us would stay faithful? Or a better question to ask is, if tomorrow we woke up and the worship of Jesus Christ was illegal, would there be enough fruit, would there be enough evidence in your life that somebody could bring charges against you and convict you? Would there actually be enough evidence in your life that your life is one that worships the Lord? Would there be a case to be made? Or could you just blend right in and go, no, I went to some mixers at the church, I went to a barbecue here or there, visited around, I was doing some networking, but, I wasn't a believer. Or would they look at your life and go, look, we've got to arrest that guy. That guy's active. In parts of the world, it's illegal to be a Christian. If you get arrested with a Bible in North Korea, it's a death sentence. Not just for you, but for your family. Being caught with the word of the Lord literally means paying with your life. And it means the lives of your wife, your kids, your parents. It's a terrible thing. Being a Christian in China can be incredibly dangerous. They have official churches that have modified doctrine. But to be caught in an underground church, to be caught worshiping the Lord, is an offense that can get you arrested. Can get you sent to a re-education center. Can get you sent to a work camp. Not just being a Christian, but exercising any faith. There's a whole ethnic group in China called the Uyghurs that are in the far western part of China, and they're mostly Muslim. And for over a decade, they've been rounding them up, sending them to re-education centers, slave labor camps, making them work under terrible conditions while being indoctrinated, taking their wives and shipping them off to be married by Han Chinese, taking their kids and re-educating them, eliminating an entire cultural identity, one step at a time, taking a blueprint right out of the Babylonian handbook They're getting after it. They won't tolerate dissent. There are places in the world where following Jesus, where following the word of the Lord can cost you everything. How real is your relationship to the Lord? How well do you know Him? Because if you know Him as well as Daniel, then no law, no edict, no decree, no threat is ever going to stop you from serving God. Because you know He is real, you know He is alive, and you know that He is in control. And no matter what scheme or plot that Satan has, you are not going to surrender and stop worshiping the Lord. Because God is real, and you know that He is sovereign. Daniel was unfazed. It doesn't say that he thought about it for a while, or he skipped some prayer time, or he had to consider it. He was unfazed. He prayed 3 times a day before that law was written. He prayed 3 times a day after that law was written. He didn't skip a beat. He wasn't worried. He was not concerned. You know, in Proverbs, right at the beginning of Proverbs, the opening second thing in Proverbs, after it talks about why you should read them, is a warning that Solomon gives. He says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol or death, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall have one purse. My son, do not walk in the ways with them. Keep your feet far from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood. Indeed, it is useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird. But they lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who gains by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors." Jesus said, "Those who live by the sword will die by the sword." Those that make their living by violence, they die by violence all the time. If you're in a gang, it's a miracle if you see your 30th birthday a lot of times. It's just unlikely. If you're a thief, eventually you're going to try to steal from the wrong person and they're going to shoot you. And that's going to be it. You're going to kick down the wrong door and there's going to be a Mossberg 12 gauge on the other side, and there it's going to be the end of you. All over a television set that you were going to sell for $200. When you gain by violence, ultimately the cost of it is your own life. These guys are plotting evil. They see a righteous guy, and they go, "We're going to take him down because he's stopping us from being able to steal. We're going to get him. We're going to take him down." And so they devise a plan, one that they think is foolproof. They have spread their net, but they've spread it in the eyes of the bird. The Lord saw them coming. And so Daniel goes up and he prays 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks. And it's interesting that it says that he prayed towards Jerusalem. When Solomon was blessing the temple and the glory of the Lord came down, that was a story we looked at a couple months ago. Solomon cried out and said, "Listen to the supplication of your servant and your people Israel when they pray towards this place. Hear in heaven your dwelling place. Hear and forgive." Daniel probably knew that. He probably knew the word of the Lord, and so he always prayed towards the holy temple. Even if it was gone, he prayed towards that place. He prayed towards Jerusalem and said, "Lord, hear my prayer." And so then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. They knew what time he prayed. They knew the deal. So they just waited. They waited for it to be prayer time, and then they showed up and goes, oh, Daniel's praying, acting all shocked. We've caught him breaking the law. They knew what they were up to. So then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den? The king answered and said, the statement is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians. Then they answered and spoke before the king and said, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you signed, but keeps making petition 3 times a day. And then as soon as the king heard this statement, he was deeply distressed and set his mind on delivering Daniel, and even until sunset he kept exerting himself to rescue him. So the king, he likes Daniel. Daniel's his top guy. He's about to make him in charge of everything. Daniel is bringing in more revenue. Daniel is honest. Daniel is serving him well. He has no desire to kill Daniel. Now he feels trapped by the situation. He's upset. It's interesting. So the king thinks about it. He gets backed into a corner. They come to him again and they go, hey, the law is the law. And so the king gives orders for Daniel to be brought and cast into the lion's den. And the king spoke to Daniel and said, your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you. It's interesting that this pagan king, who doesn't have a relationship with the Lord, but knows Daniel, knows that his God is able. He knows how wise and righteous Daniel is. I'm sure he has seen in Daniel's life that things have been accomplished that are beyond comprehension. And he looks at Daniel and actually has faith that Daniel's going to come out of this all right. He looks at him and says, your God is able to deliver you. It's a lot of faith for a guy that doesn't know the Lord, just off of observation. And I think about in my life, some of the prayer warriors I know and some of the miracles that I've seen. And when you see miracles happen in your life, when you see prayers get answered in mighty ways, you start to realize that God is able. That He is able to do things that you cannot even fathom are possible. You might not understand how, but you know it can be done. And so you trust that the Lord is going to work it out. I remember when my mom got sick. She fell, she broke a hip. She was going to need rehab and possibly long-term nursing home care. She'd already been ill for a while. And the nursing home that I wanted her to go to had like a 3-year waiting list for a bed. And it was hard even to get in on the rehab floor with the regular insurance. And she was in the hospital, and they got these social workers that arrange like the discharge plan and the deal. And so they come in and they're like, hey, we need to figure out where you want to send her to do her physical rehab work. And I said, well, I want you to send her here. And she looks at me and she goes, it's very hard to get in there. Even for the rehab, they're real slow to respond. A lot of times there's a lot of hoops and, it just doesn't work. And I'll send it over there. But what other places do you want besides that? And I could tell from her body language and from her attitude that it was, give me your B and your C. I'm not even going to send it to A. I'm not even going to bother to try. I'm just going to come back and tell you it didn't work because that's my experience, and we're just going to move to the alternative. And I said, no, that's the only one. That's the only place. I go, if she doesn't get in, if there's a problem, let me know and I'll call them. I go, there is no B. She goes, okay. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And so did my aunt. And a couple hours later, she came back into the room and she looked stunned. She goes, you're not going to believe it. I faxed over all the paperwork and they called me back right away and they had a bed available. It's no problem at all. She's going to be able to go there. I've never had it be so easy to get a bed at this nursing home. And I said, that's because the Lord made sure that that bed was available. That's because the Lord was there. Because I've been praying for that bed. And then turned out she wasn't well enough to go home. And I needed her to stay. I got a long waiting list. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And they worked it out that she could stay. Praise the Lord. God is able to do things when everybody in all human logic tells you that it's not possible. It's not possible for you. It's not possible for me. But do you not know what the Lord God Almighty can do with dust and dry bones? Have you not heard? Have you not seen what God is capable of doing? And so he throws him in, and the stone is sealed. They put their signet rings on it. They do their guards. They do their whole little thing. Nobody crosses it. The king's up all night, distressed over the whole situation. Soon as light shows in the morning, like the very minimum amount of time necessary to keep Daniel in there. You know, like there's a minimum amount of time, I got to throw him in overnight, whatever. Immediately, at break of day, he hurriedly, in haste, goes down there. And he comes near, and the king speaks and goes, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? And then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth. And they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him. And also towards you, O king, I have committed no crime. Blessed is the man who walks in the path of righteousness. You know, David wrote, all my bones will say, Lord, who is like you? Who delivers the afflicted from him who is too strong for him, and the afflicted and the needy from him who robs him? God will and can deliver you. Paul said it in 2 Timothy. He said, the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. And so the king was very pleased, and he gave orders for Daniel to be taken out. And so Daniel was taken out, and then the king gave orders that they brought those men who had maliciously plotted and accused Daniel and cast them, their children, and their wives into the lion's den. He pulled in North Korea. He pulled a Kim Jong-un on them. That's what he did. Pulled a Kim Jong and said, hey, not just you, we're going to take care of your wives and your kids too at the same. Throw them all in there. It's buffet day for the lions. It's feast day in Lion's Den. Throws them all in there. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions had overpowered them and crushed their bones. The Lord conveys to us that it was immediate so that we don't think, well, maybe the lions weren't hungry. Maybe they had just had a large meal before Daniel was thrown in there, and so that's the reason. No, these guys couldn't even fall all the way down before the lions were leaping, going, food. That's how hungry they were. It wasn't that they were overfed and lazy. You know, sometimes I'll offer my dog a treat, and he'll kind of look at me, and he won't even run off the couch to come get it. He'll just lay there and expect me to walk it over and feed it to him by hand. Because he's not really hungry. And he's spoiled. And he's like, that looks good. Maybe I'll just wait and you'll bring it to me. I'm not in a rush. It's because he's had a good meal already. He's a spoiled little well-fed creature. Doesn't know hunger. These lions were not laying on the couch waiting for somebody to hand feed them the roast. They were hungry. They were supernaturally prevented from taking Daniel down. The Lord is clear to convey it with the speed in which they, not only just one guy, they wipe out the whole families. There's 120 of these people, their wives and their kids. None of them are making it to the bottom. These are some hungry lions, and there's a lot of them. I mean, they're just in rapid fire. It's like, all of a sudden you're in Call of Duty and you just got upgraded. You're like, all right, I got to take them all out. That's what these lions are doing. And Darius the king wrote to all the people and nations and made a decree that all the dominion of the kingdom would fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and enduring forever. Daniel's faithfulness converted a king. Daniel's testimony won over a pagan. In what looked to be the most hopeless situation, the Lord was glorified, Daniel was delivered, and a king acknowledged the power of the living God. It is only when things look the most hopeless that glory of God can be the most bright. Do not be afraid to stand for the Lord. He will, He can, and He is capable of delivering you if you will be faithful to Him. Let's pray. Almighty Father, Heavenly King, Lord, thank you for today. Oh Lord, thank you for the story of Daniel, for the testimony of one who was faithful to you despite terrible circumstances, who stood for you even when everything around him was pushing him in a direction away from you. Lord, thank you for the example that he has given us that we can read and be encouraged. Oh Lord, I lift these warriors up to you, Father. I pray that they would be strengthened and encouraged this week, that they would seek to serve you first, that above all they would seek your kingdom and your righteousness, knowing that one who remains steadfast until the end will receive the crown of life. Oh Lord, I pray that if there is someone here who doesn't know you, that tonight would be the night that they would declare that you are the living one, the true God. That with our heads bowed, they would pray in their heart, oh Lord, I am a sinner, and I know that I have broken your law. Forgive me. Save me. Lord, your word says that you sent your Messiah, your Son, to die for me, and that he rose again from the dead, and that by his blood I am atoned for. So Jesus, I am acknowledging you now as my Savior. Save me, Lord. I am ready to kneel, to submit, to obey to you. Lord, I don't even know where to begin, but I am ready to obey. Oh Lord, I pray that you would pour your blessing and your mercy out on this Warrior Center, Lord. That you would make your face shine upon these men. That you would encourage them. That you would meet with them every morning. That they would grow in the grace and knowledge of you, Lord. And that they would be a source of revival in this city. That their testimony would shine brightly before all. And that people would know that you are the living God. Almighty Father, Heavenly King, it's in the matchless name of Yeshua, Messiah Jesus, I pray. Amen. Thanks,